Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. Five Nights at Freddy's content. Oh boy, and I've even got like a spicy hot take on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. So why'd I pick this up? I was at Walmart, and of course when I'm at Walmart, I'm just running around thinking, yes, I'm at Walmart, I gotta buy something. And I saw this and picked it up. The graphic novel adaptation of the New York Times best-selling novel, The Silver Eyes by Scott Cawthon. Scott Cawthon got canceled last month, and to his credit, he did not apologize, and in fact, he's retired, hopefully as a multimillionaire. I hope he's a billionaire off of this franchise. Maybe not that stupid rich, but I just wish him a happy retirement with his family. Screw cancel culture. So to make Scott Cawthon even richer than he already is, I decided to just go ahead and pick this up for a review. So now it's time for my hot take on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. I've been weirdly fascinated by this franchise because I always love when someone taps into something weirdly specific, and suddenly get very popular. Like, why is this such a popular franchise with like 10-year-olds, basically? And I think the secret is that Scott Cawthon retold a classic ghost story using a more modern specific thing, right? So if you go back to the Victorian era, ghost stories, they'd be set in churchyards. The Monkey's Paw is about a little British family mourning the loss of their son. There's this important distinction I think you need for good ghost stories, which is creepy or terror versus gore and horror. And they're two very different vibes. Horror is blood and guts and, like a body ripped to pieces, and you react in shock and horror and you recoil from it. Terror is more like going out into the woods and feeling vaguely creeped out by trees, because the trees make you think of like hands reaching out to you or something. You don't know what's out in the woods. So terror isn't hitting you with blood and guts, but you're afraid because there could be something threatening out in the darkness or out in the unknown. So the neat thing I think about Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is it had this vague sense of terror without necessarily hitting you with too much horror, even though there were like jump scares. It wasn't hitting you with all the blood and the guts. Over time, as more games come out, and then lightning basically struck twice for Scott Cawthon. So like a lot of fake geek guys, I found out about this game by Markiplier playing it, right? So if you watch Markiplier playing it, the appeal of watching Markiplier playing it is watching him make silly faces and freak out as the animatronics jump out and grab him. I think that's why most people have heard of this game without ever playing it themselves. Then Game Theory started doing theory videos on it, and then it became like nerd territory, where nerds wanted to figure out the details of all of the little subtle Easter eggs and references and making timelines and trying to piece together what specifically is the murder mystery behind these games. Now, that I would say is more in the category of horror. There's some serial killer. The purple guy is some kind of murderer. We got to figure out who the purple guy is. We got to figure out what the bite of 1987 is. We need to figure out what the different restaurants are and place it all in some logical, well-constructed timeline. However, a little ghost story in the Victorian style isn't about that. It's about giving you a vague, unsettling feeling that maybe there's something threatening or spiritual that is after you. And it's almost like these are two completely different genres. A murder mystery is more about trying to logically figure out everything that happened, piece it all together, catch the murderer. A ghost story, there's a little image of a girl walking around the courtyard who's maybe chases after people, but no one's really sure if she's really there, right? You can see how those are two completely different kind of things. Now, maybe you can combine those two genres and have a murder mystery that turns into a ghost story, but the key aspect, I think, of a ghost story is this supernatural, spiritual, satanic, or if not satanic, maybe just otherworldly, alien, like fairy-like kind of evil. It's something that human beings basically want to get away from because we can tell it's too big for us, it's too foreign for us, it's not something we can understand, and we don't really know if it's a threat, if they're friends or foes, right? So in the very first game, you basically have these animatronics that are moving around, and it's almost kind of a joke, right? Like they're these goofy cartoon bears and a goofy cartoon is she a chicken or a duck? Chica, I think she's a chicken, right? So there's this sense of humor to it. Oh, let's eat. It's a joke because that's like a baby's bib, but maybe let's eat mean let's eat you. Things like the bite of 1987 were a gag. You get these phone calls from a security guy who sort of casually mentioned that someone got their head bitten off in 1987, and you're just working like this crappy wage slave job, monitoring the cameras for these things that are after you, right? So the first game is kind of like this simple joke with this vaguely unsettling feeling that these animatronics are coming after you. And if you were traumatized by Chuck E. Cheese in the 80s, it works even better. The later games start adding all of this extra dimension of, the business partners, and before Five Nights Fazbear's, there was Fredbear's, right? It got more complicated. And I think in the process of getting more complicated, it became less and less about being this whammy of a little ghost story in the Victorian tradition. So that's my hot take on the entire Five Nights at Fredbear's, or what is it even? Five Nights at Freddy's. There we go. Okay. By the way, I really like the detail of having silver ink on the cover, so it gives the eyes this kind of sheen. That's neat. So basically what I think Five Nights at Freddy's needs to be is Five Nights at Freddy's shouldn't be an R-rated or even a PG-13 rated horror movie. A Five Nights at Freddy's movie should be the scariest PG movie ever made without blood and guts in it. And the way I think you do that is they ought to emphasize the supernatural element of things that are moving that are not supposed to be moving on their own, and de-emphasize the game theory, hyper-complex murder plot spanning decades. Now, maybe they do want that murder mystery of let's find the serial killer as an undertone, but the scary part of it should be this supernatural, unexplainable element to it. The Silver Eyes, I almost feel like this was probably this was made to kind of like cash in on the success of Five Nights at Freddy's. It was made after the fourth game when things started getting more complex and we started having the multiple characters in restaurants and potential murder suspects, right? Since this has come out, there have been several movies that have come out that are almost definitely scripts that were written for a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and then they didn't get rejected, so they just rejiggered it and took out the Freddy's characters and put in different characters. So I guess my problem with the Silver Eyes is it feels like it's been influenced by the complex plot. So by this point, it's not just the original four anymore. It's also Golden Freddy and Springtrap and Charlie, whose dad was involved in the old restaurant, and his business partner was untrustworthy, and her father has been suspected of maybe being the guy who murders the kids, but we find out that his business partner, Dave, the security guard, is more likely the guy who murdered the kids, unless there's another even more complex explanation since then. That's all on game theory. But part of my whole point is I don't want the complex explanation on game theory. I want a hard-hitting, creepy, vaguely unsettling little ghost story without the blood and guts that you can take your 10-year-old to. So the Silver Eyes is close to being that. So I like that we follow a character, Charlie, who, she has some childhood traumas, kind of like watching her dad working on these machines that vaguely unsettle her. So she has that primal fear that the audience probably has. She had a twin brother, and her twin brother went missing. There were murders at their favorite, kids restaurant when they were little kids, and that sort of unsettled the town. I think that's a good angle to lead into, where the murderer, whoever he is, has had like this lasting impact on the town. The absence of these children is felt by the people of this small town decades later. The kids have lots of memories of the place, so they decide kind of like to go there and just explore. They say as maybe almost a way of honoring the memory of the people, of their friends they lost at this restaurant, right? This wasn't, from a visual communication standpoint, some of this wasn't laid out. I always think you should write almost for like a 6-year-old in mind. Like I almost feel like they should have a flashback where they show, murder mystery at popular pizza restaurant, show like the police tape, like make it like really laid out simple for the target audience. But anyway, so as they're exploring, they come back and explore a few times and meet Dave, the security guard, the man behind the slaughter. Is he the purple man? Who knows? But he reveals like he's actually like a creepy like serial killer who likes to dress up in a bunny costume and kidnap and maybe kill kids, right? Like he's got some sort of perverse interest in dressing up in a bunny costume and getting up to dirty dealings. Charlie's father at some point commits suicide, and somehow the animatronics are either involved or he ordered the animatronic to kill him, right, as his way of committing suicide, maybe as out of guilt over the fact that his business partner murdered people in the restaurant that he built up. So can you kind of see what I'm getting at as I'm describing this? As it's gotten more complicated, that goofy bonk scene. Anyway, as it's gotten more complicated, the emphasis has been pulled away from a creepy ghost story about cute cartoon animals coming to life and chasing us around, and more about like piecing together this whole series of events and dirty doings that led up to this. So I want you to kind of like go back in time before game theory, before Markiplier. What is the very first game about? It's a joke, silly game where you're stuck watching these things that are trying to get you. And what's unsettling about them is you're watching them move around and you're watching them move closer to you. And you sort of have to OCD, control the doors and monitor the cameras and make sure you're not burning up too much battery, or they'll get you, right? Almost at like a 6-year-old level. 6-year-olds are scared of monsters coming out saying boo and grabbing them, right? Like it's almost like a peekaboo kind of thing. And there is in the Easter eggs this unsettling feeling that the reason these animatronics are moving around is that they're possessed by the spirits of dead children who were murdered near or in the restaurant, right? So and then that's the whammy. We don't need to solve the mystery. We don't need to piece out what everything is. The whammy is that the weird moving robots are actually the spirits of dead children. How would you, I don't even know, maybe you can't make a movie out of something like this. Maybe it's like trying to take, like something like The Monkey's Paw is a short story. You can read it in half an hour. Maybe you can't take something like The Monkey's Paw and stretch it out to an hour-and-a-half movie without losing the warmth of that scene. Or maybe you can lengthen it by also having the murder mystery. Let's catch the serial killer element of it. But I think it loses its warmth when we stop feeling kind of like this vaguely unsettling feeling of ghostly things are after us. I love ghost stories, and I'm not a big fan of horror movies like Saw. And I think the unsettling feeling of a Victorian ghost story really sticks with you. It's almost like it's a more intellectual and harder thing to write and a more complicated experience to describe than just, oh no, blood and guts splashing out at me everywhere, blah, 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 right? And one of the things I think can be attributed to the success of Five Nights at Freddy's is I think for 10-year-olds, he retold a vaguely unsettling Victorian-style ghost story in something that's reminiscent of a Chuck E. Cheese, so it would speak to modern audience. So that's my hot take. The Silver Eyes, I can't strongly recommend it. Like if you just have like a kid who's a Five Nights at Freddy's nut, it'd be like a perfectly suitable little PG rated ghost story for them. Couple little, blood streaks, couple little, adult jokes that would probably go over a young person's head. And I'm sure they've watched Markiplier, and I'm sure they've watched the game theory videos to have like the context and background for all the weird theory stuff. If you don't have that, I think you're going to be able to understand it perfectly well. Like they sneak into the restaurant and the serial killer is after them. So that it stands on its own 2 feet pretty well. I don't think it's as scary as the original game. And that's kind of like the punch I would like to see in a movie or in one of these books. I also don't think this is supposed to be canon to the game. So this is more, the novels are a little bit more of their own thing, where maybe they're trying to flesh out some ideas and theories, and what happens in the game isn't necessarily what happens in the novel. So not a strong recommendation. I think I'm going to give this one away. But I do appreciate Scott Cawthon for coming up with an idea. The fact that it's popular, even though it's kind of goofy, says something. And I actually kind of like the goofy comedic aspect of it, where it's so ridiculous, and yet especially in the early games. I think this series peaked at the second game, personally, but especially in the early games, it does have this otherworldly, spiritual, satanic thing that's unsettling and appropriate for a ghost story, right? That's the thing that people always wonder about Scott Cawthon is, why did a Christian write something this messed up? And my defense is always, if you're a Christian, it's good to take inspiration from Satan for the bad guys, because Satan is a bad guy. And you can definitely, I can definitely see how the satanic and maybe like the biblical idea of demons has informed the evil in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. So that's my opinion. I'm a Norman Marvik fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.